Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we are decoding one of the absolutely wildest contradictions shaking up both the tech and financial worlds right now. We're looking at Anthropic, a company whose meteoric rise is driven by this really profound paradox. On one hand, they aggressively champion safety and responsibility. But on the other hand, their newest AI model poses a threat so severe, it literally has global infrastructure on high alert. Let's unpack exactly what is happening here, the massive business stakes involved, and ultimately why this matters so much to you.
Okay, let's dive into this. For decades, Silicon Valley operated under a very specific, honestly kind of reckless mantra: move fast and break things. But as we look at the escalating stakes today, we really have to ask ourselves, is that era abruptly over? Because we aren't just talking about a buggy social media update anymore, right? We are talking about artificial intelligence so advanced that the potential for havoc is causing literal worldwide panic.
Just to help us wrap our heads around the sheer scale of what we're dealing with, consider this staggering number: $800 billion. That is the valuation currently drawing intense investor interest to Anthropic, making it close to, if not, the single most valuable startup in the entire world. They are aggressively challenging OpenAI's early dominance. And, these massive financial stakes are entirely turbocharged by the hype surrounding their latest, highly restricted AI model, which they call Mythos.
Chapter 1. The Mythos cyber threat.
So the exact threats that currently have financial leaders on high alert really stem from how this model operates. Notice the word autonomously here. Mythos doesn't just find bugs in web browsers or payment services. Step 2, it actually creates an exploit plan. And then step 3, which is the real kicker, it takes autonomous action to do harm to the product it just found the flaw in. Historically, nation-states had to spend years and massive resources building armies of expert military hackers to do this. Mythos completely lowers that barrier to entry. It means the power to launch devastating cyber attacks is suddenly accessible to everyone, from foreign adversaries right down to everyday financial criminals.
And because of that crazy autonomous capability, the global response has been completely unprecedented. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell recently summoned Wall Street leaders to urgent private meetings. The message was super clear: banks better start testing this thing, like yesterday. And it doesn't stop in the U.S. either. The central banks of Canada and the UK have also been calling companies together. Why? Because the specific vulnerabilities Mythos can exploit threaten the exact digital pipes that handle the trillions of dollars protecting your personal bank accounts and global commerce.
Chapter 2. The Glass Wing Strategy.
Anthropic is trying to manage this crisis through something called Project Glasswing. Apple, Google, Amazon. This is a literal who's who of Silicon Valley. What's absolutely fascinating here is how highly unusual this arrangement is. Anthropic is taking their unreleased, highly guarded intellectual property and sharing it with fierce, direct competitors, explicitly allowing them to critique their work. It's an incredibly unorthodox, exclusive rollout designed to pool industry expertise just to contain the Mythos model.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the glaring paradox of it all. Despite gathering the most sophisticated tech companies on Earth into this ultra-exclusive group, there were still reports of unauthorized users accessing the model. A system heralded as way too dangerous for the public, guarded by a literal coalition of tech giants, still suffered what experts brutally called a miss of terribly basic cybersecurity practice 101. So it turns out the theoretical threat of AI to cybersecurity is actually a very, very messy reality.
Chapter 3. Clashing with the Pentagon.
Let's rewind a bit to look at the origins of this showdown from July 2025. Remember, Anthropic was founded by former OpenAI employees specifically to build advanced systems safely. And the core friction here really comes down to this. Anthropic pushed back hard against their AI being used for mass surveillance or autonomous weapons. On the flip side, the Pentagon argues that no private company should be dictating how technology is used on a battlefield. It perfectly highlights what industry leaders are calling the ultimate ethical dilemma of our time. Who gets to decide the rules of digital warfare? A tech CEO or a four-star general? This clash of ideologies actually escalated to the point where Anthropic took the Pentagon to court.
And wow, that lawsuit created a fascinating geopolitical split screen right inside the U.S. government itself. On one side, you have the Department of Defense declaring Anthropic a supply chain risk and literally seeking a blacklist. But simultaneously, the Treasury and the White House are pushing to expand access to establish U.S. AI supremacy. This total lack of a unified regulatory framework highlights a really stark realization from parts of the administration: you simply cannot cut off the company at the very vanguard of U.S. AI development, no matter how cautious they're trying to be.
Chapter 4. Enterprise versus Consumer AI.
And this brilliantly illustrates how a company actively navigating Pentagon lawsuits actually makes its money. It comes down to a fundamental difference in revenue models. Look at OpenAI. They went straight for consumers, right? They boast over 900 million weekly users with super broad accessibility. But Anthropic took the exact opposite path. Their primary targets are enterprise businesses and big banks. This is why you might not use Anthropic to write a quick email, but your bank uses them to secure your mortgage. They leverage that safety-first branding to lock in highly lucrative specialized corporate contracts rather than just chasing everyday consumer clicks.
And why exactly are those enterprise contracts so lucrative? Well, look at this number. The projected expenditure for global cybersecurity by the year 2030 is a staggering $300 billion. Anthropic is essentially trying to fight fire with fire here. In their own words, the exact same capabilities that make Mythos so incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands make it absolutely invaluable for finding and fixing flaws in important software. By solving the massive, costly bugs that they themselves can detect, they open up a huge, exclusive revenue stream.
Chapter 5. The Doom Marketing Payoff. Now, there is a growing, somewhat cynical perspective on Wall Street right now that hamstringing the rollout of Mythos actually amounts to a totally brilliant marketing campaign. The idea is basically, look at us, we built an AI way too powerful to release. If it's bait, well, the bait has totally been taken. A Bloomberg index tracking AI-related companies continues to vastly outperform the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. The global anxiety has officially shifted from will AI take my job to will AI literally break the global banking system. And paradoxically, that heightened sense of fear only increases the perceived value of Anthropic's unreleased tech.
Let's move to see how this builds massive pressure on these private companies to prove profitability and go public. Looking at the AI initial public offering rates for 2026, we have SpaceX and Elon Musk's xAI potentially merging for a June public offering. Anthropic is looking at their own potential offering as soon as October, and OpenAI is expected to vie for their offering late in the year. The race to actually capitalize on this $800 billion valuation hype is officially on. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question to wrap up our explainer today. You have a company founded entirely on safety, a company that literally sued the Pentagon to prevent its tech from being used in warfare, and yet they built a tool that could cripple global banking. Are they genuinely terrified of the capabilities of their own model, or is locking it away behind closed doors an incredibly calculated doom marketing campaign designed to juice their valuation right before a massive IPO? The answer to that likely shapes the future of the global economy. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the motives behind the technology shaping our world.